Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're at in the world and when you're watching this. Glad to have you join me today on Are You Rudder or Are You Rudderless? Leaders, they chart the course. Hello again, my name is Richard Talbot, and I'm a leadership and business coach, trainer, and public speaker located here in the United States on the East Coast. I'm in my little private lair, more commonly known as home, and located in the state on the East Coast where they call themselves Tar Heels. So we'll see if you can figure it out from there. I think my real hometown is listed on my either Twitter page or on Blab, or for sure on my Facebook page, my LinkedIn page. I'm on a lot of different pages. But I'm glad to have you join us here today. And thanks so much for being a part of it. Today we're going to talk about the next law of navigation. It's called the Law of Navigation. It's one of the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership based on the book by John Maxwell. I am a certified John Maxwell team member, and I am very proud to be a part of that group. And I hope that I can add some value to you today. And as we talk a little bit about the law of navigation, how anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a true leader to chart the course. A few things you need to know about me. I am a coffeeholic. As you probably have, if you have not watched any of my previous videos on replay, you see me drinking a lot of coffee that I enjoy doing. I'm not addicted to coffee in the sense that I can't give it up. I just choose not to. And so I hope that you have pulled up your favorite beverage. If you're in the cold northern hemisphere, then I hope it's something warm like coffee, hot chocolate, or something else warm. If you're in our southern hemisphere of the world where it's a little warmer, I hope you pulled up your favorite cool beverage. Unless you're like me, coffee is good year-round, every day, all the time. I probably shouldn't say this on recording because my doctor may find it, but I drink a full pot of decaf coffee at least every day. Now, before you get too excited, that's better than I used to be. When I was younger, when I had hair on the top of my head, on my face, on my upper lip, and it was a color that you could see, blonde, not gray and white like it is now. Well, it's shaved, so that kind of makes a little bit of a difference. But when I was younger, I could go through 2 or 3 pots of regular coffee, the hard stuff, every day and fall right to sleep. I can still do that. I quit drinking regular coffee probably about not quite 10 years ago. And I've just stuck with it. I found a blend that tastes like regular coffee, but it keeps me going, gives me something to do with my hands when I'm sitting at the computer or I'm thinking or reading, and I enjoy doing that. So again, thank you for joining me. I'm glad to have you on board, and I hope that today's talk about the law of navigation, how you as a leader can either be the rudder or you can go through life rudderless, without a purpose. And yet true leaders chart the course, not only for others, but especially for themselves. So anyone can steer a ship, your ship, a group's ship, a company's ship. Anyone can steer it, but a true leader charts the course, knows where to go, what to do, and helps find ways to do it. There's a few assumptions we need to know about that. Navigation requires vision. You need to know where you want to go. Now, if you're like me, you may have had a lot of dreams growing up in your life, and I worked in private business and in nonprofits almost all my life until just the last couple years, where I've been working now for myself. Some would say it's still a nonprofit, but we can laugh about that. But whenever I've worked in any company, secular, religious, for-profit, nonprofit, family business, whatever, you always had to have a vision. You always had to have an idea of where you wanted to go. And navigation says you know that vision, or at least you have a vision. And along with that vision, then it requires an understanding of the future. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that leaders are clairvoyant, that they can predict the future. They're prophets, that they have the ability to know what's going to happen in advance. But I believe you can look at trends and situations in the world and have a good concept of what's coming down the pike. I think you can look at cultural changes. I'm not going to call them evolutions, but cultural transitions that are occurring. And you can have a pretty good idea of where things are heading down the pike if things continue as they are. You could also then understand where things could change, whether they change now or change later. So not only do you have to have a vision of where you want to go, you have to also have an understanding of what the future could hold. And navigation requires a correct interpretation and understanding of the past. A famous person once said, "Those who ignore history are bound to repeat it." And I think that's true in our everyday lives, as well as it could be true with countries, with governments, with societies, with religious movements, whatever they are. If you misinterpret or ignore the past and the lessons that you can learn from it, then you're bound to repeat. You're bound to repeat the same mistakes, the same areas. I think of an example. When I was working on my master's, I was looking at comparing how a relatively current Christian movement called Vineyard compared to the early 1600 movements, 1600s, early 1700 movement of the Society of Friends, or Quakers. The reason I chose to do that, and I'm sharing this just as an illustration point, is that the founder of the Vineyard movement was a former Quaker pastor. So to me, there was some historical tie-in. One of the things I did notice was that there didn't seem to be in one of the movements a sense of understanding who was going to take next steps. You had a leader. You had someone who was kind of like the catalyst for the movement. But after they left the scene, there seemed to be a vacuum that developed in the movement, in the leadership style. That leadership, ultimately, that vacuum was filled and always will be filled, because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you leave a vacuum in your life, if you leave a vacuum in your organization, if you leave a vacuum in your business, in your church, in your synagogue, wherever you're looking at, if you leave an opening and don't fill it, it will be filled, but maybe not the way you had it planned. You know, to navigate for others, to be a true leader for others, the leader must know the way, the vision, must show the way, understanding the future, and be able to articulate how to get to where they want to go. And ultimately, that leader must go the way. As a leader, we are called, because we're all leaders, again, just to make sure that we are the same on our definitions. Leadership to me is nothing more than influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Do you influence somebody? Do you influence a group of people? Do you influence an institution, a business, whatever? If you have an influence, then you are a leader. So for you to continue that influence and be that leader, you not only must know the way forward, you must show everybody around you the way forward. You can't keep it to yourself and hide it. But the hardest thing, I think, is that you must go the way. You must take those steps. Those are the hard things for me. If I talk to one of my clients about, self-discipline, I have to then look at my own life and say, okay, where am I at self-discipline? If I coach one of my clients on dealing with being clear about your financial numbers and understanding invoices and accountability and bidding and your costs, everything along that line when it comes regarding business, then that means I also have to have that knowledge and understanding of my business. If I talk to a client about reaching your full potential and don't give up, but keep reading and keep learning and keep pushing yourself beyond the boundaries, then I also have to be learning and keep going and keep reading and keep pushing myself beyond my own boundaries. That's very difficult. You see, a true leader does not sit back and say, charge, and they're not sitting on a horse. They're on the horse leading the way, alongside, with, encouraging, not in the back, yelling, keep going, keep going. I'll eventually catch up to you. We talked earlier in the very first blab that I did about blowing your top or lifting your lid on your life. If you want somebody to reach a 7, then you've got at least to be at an 8. Because how can you take someone at one level and take them to a level that you've never been at? How can you lead somebody to a place that you have not seen, you have not experienced, you have not even striven or strove to, sorry for the English, strove to reach? So not only do you need to have vision and an understanding of the future and a correct interpretation of the past, but you must be able to know the way and show the way, and ultimately you need to go the way. So that requires planning. Planning. Thinking about it, not just always jumping in head first and hoping that there's water in the swimming pool as you dive off the high board. Sometimes you have to take the time to fill the pool with water. You have to make sure that the plug is in so that the water doesn't keep draining out. So you have to plan ahead and be prepared. And that takes time. That takes intentionality. So the first thing you need to do then is predetermine a course of action. What do you want to do? What are your strengths that you want to play to? What are the things that you do well that you want to keep doing and expand on and improve on? What are the weaknesses or opportunities you have in your life that you either do want to work on or at the very least want to try to avoid so they don't get in the way of your vision and of your ship? You see, that image of being a rudder, or are you rudderless, is that a boat has this little rudder. Compared to the size of the boat, it can be very, very small. Even in ratio, very, very small. But it's that rudder as it turns in the water that directs the whole boat. Doesn't matter if it's a little canoe and that rudder is your paddle and you're sitting in the back, or if you're on the largest aircraft carrier in the world. Every boat needs to have a rudder to direct it. And if you're rudderless, then you're at the mercy of the water, of the currents, of the wind, whatever it may be. You're not able to predetermine your own course of action. You're not able to plan ahead. You're not able to see and go where you want to go and bring others with you because you're just coasting and drifting along. And, you know, too many of us do that. Too many of us believe that life happens to us instead of us living life. We believe that we're a victim of our circumstances. You know, there's just things out of our control we can't handle. And, you know, in some things there are. There are things out of our control we can't handle. We don't control the weather. We really don't. Last weekend, we had a nice snowstorm and blizzard here in the state that they call the Tar Heels. I spent Saturday shoveling with my wife out on the drive. I was tired. If I had my way, even though I love a good snowstorm, I really do love snowstorms. I think they're quiet. I think they're beautiful. I think they're peaceful. But I had my way. Once I was done with the snow, it would have been nice that the sun came out at 85, 90 degrees and melted everything off within hours. We still have piles of snow around. In fact, we really never got out of the house until Tuesday. We were in for 4 days. But life isn't like that. To paraphrase a very famous poem, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom, the knowledge to know the difference. Taking one day at a time, living one moment at a time as a pathway to peace. Taking this world not as I want it to be, but as it really is. There are some things that, we just can't control. But there are things we can. And one of those things is, frankly, our ship, life, ourselves. We can control whether we grow or not. We can control whether we're going to be happy or not. We can control whether we're going to forgive or not. We can control how effective our influence is going to be or not. We can do all that. So to plan ahead, first of all, that stands for predetermining a course of action. Where do we want to go? And what do we want to do? Then the next thing we need to do is lay out our goals. So we know what we want to do, but what is it going to look like? One of the things I want to challenge you to think about and encourage you to consider as I grab another sip of my great coffee is that I want you, while it's important to have goals, to not focus exclusively on goals. Because the next one is about adjusting your priorities. And I put these two together in a sense because I think we can become too goal-oriented in the sense of, well, let's say I want to make $1 million. Okay, that could be a valid, reasonable, upright goal. But when you hit $1 million, then what? If you focus just exclusively on your goal, once you hit it, then what? You have to set another goal, which we all think is fine and dandy, but there's that time when you hit the goal and before you decide whether you want to set another goal, it becomes very easy for us to just pause and maybe stop and forget about what got us to that goal. So instead, what I would recommend you doing is that while it's good to lay out your goals, it's good to have an idea of where you want to go and what you want to be. Make sure your priorities are in the right place. That means you have to adjust them. Your priority is your growth. If you put the focus more on continuing a growth process of becoming an effective leader, of becoming an effective influencer of others, I believe you'll still hit your goal, whether it's $1 million or publish a book or learn how to sing, play the piano or whatever. But you don't stop when you hit that goal. What you end up doing then is continuing on because the process becomes more important than the goal. And the goal becomes nothing more than a signpost along the life of the process. So you need to predetermine your course of action. You need to lay out your goals. You need to adjust your priorities, because we all can compromise on what's important to us. But sometimes, and I highly encourage you to do this, it's very wise to write down the areas you will not compromise. Your integrity, maybe your family relationships. Could be a lot of different things that you will not compromise on. Once you know what you won't compromise on, then it frees up the areas where you will. I may not compromise on spending family time, but I will be willing to work 50 to 60 hours instead of just 40. I'm not going to compromise on some basic moral values that I have, integrity values that I have, no matter what. And then the last part of the plan on Plan Ahead is notify key people in your life. If you're truly going to be an influencer, a leader that lifts others up, then I strongly, strongly encourage you to let others know what you want to accomplish. We're all kind of scared about that. We all get a little nervous because that means we're accountable for what we do. The way we're going, our priorities, our plan, our vision, our actions. So that's the plan on Plan Ahead. Now let's talk about the ahead part of Plan Ahead. First one is allow time for acceptance. And, you know, in one sense, we can be talking about a business or an organization, coworkers. Allow them time to accept who you are and what you want to do and where you want to go. But I also believe it applies to us individually as well, to our families, to people that we are close to and close to us. When we lay out a vision, a plan, a purpose that we want to achieve and become, when we articulate out loud who we want to be and how we want to be, for some people in our lives, especially people very close to us, it may come as a shock. Give them time to accept it. That doesn't mean you stop. Not at all. Not at all. In fact, I would say at that time is a good time to keep going. But allow them to see what's going on. Share with them. Find your trusted few and let them know what you're doing and how you're doing and why you're doing. And that ties into the H on Plan Ahead. Allow, then head into action. There's a fine line between waiting for permission and then just going. That sounds funny in one sense, but how often do we wait for other people to give us permission to do what in our hearts we really want to do, or what we really know we should do? I submit that we head into action even as the people that are close to us, get used to what we want to do. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how we are not only the average of the 5 closest people in our lives, but we're also the sum of the 5 closest people in our lives. Some of those people may not like what you want to do for various reasons. It'll change the status quo is probably the most common one. You upset the apple cart by becoming somebody different, by changing who you are, not in your core values and your core beliefs, but in how you portray yourself and you come across makes some people very uncomfortable. Other people may not appreciate it because, well, frankly, it makes them look bad. because it holds up a mirror for them to look at and go, gee, I need to make some decisions too, but I don't want to. So I'm just going to stay away from him because he's making decisions that I should be making as well. Some people just don't want you to be successful. And that sounds weird. And if you called them on it, they would totally deny that. But think about this for a second. Do you have people in your life that as you strive to change and become somebody else, not in a sense that you remake yourself, maybe you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're trying to find a new career path, maybe you're trying to start your own business, and all they seem to do is say, no, you can't do it, and sabotage whatever you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to lose weight, and all of a sudden they start bringing over desserts. You talk about starting your own business and they find you job opportunities that pay a lot of money and provide that, quote, security that your own business won't provide. You talk about strengthening your core values, and all of a sudden the things that they used to do with you that kind of went against your core values or were kind of on the fringe, all of a sudden now they want to do more of those with you. They may not overtly tell you they don't want you to succeed. They may not overtly tell you they don't want you to become better than you are now and become a better influencer. They may not tell you that, but look at their actions. We all know people who do that. And if they're part of your inner circle, part of the people that you have notified about what you want to do, then you better be ready to face those issues when they come up, because they will come up. And that may mean you have to let them go. That may mean you have to call them on their behavior or their actions or their attitudes or their words, and they will not like it. That's very difficult, especially if it's family, especially if it's people that you've poured yourself into and they've poured themselves into you. And they've helped you through tough times, and they've encouraged you through tough times and stood beside you during very tough times. But go ahead, move into that action, which then leads us into expect a problem. Expect problems. Why are we surprised when we have difficulties? I submit that a lot of the people in this world who appear not to have difficulties are really probably not doing too much. They're not challenging themselves or not challenging others. They may be rudderless and floating along on the current. You know, when you float on the current, you don't have to sweat because you're not going against the current. You're not going across the river or the current. You're just going with it. When I was growing up in a small town in Iowa, there was a little creek or creek, depends on how you pronounce it and wherever you live. There was a little creek not too far from our town. And every Mother's Day weekend, a bunch of us families, friends, all of us, would drive down to this pasture covered with beautiful smelling bluebells. These are flowers that literally look like bells hanging down and are blue and have that yellow pistil on the inside that's just beautiful, and they smelled gorgeous. And from a distance from the road, that pasture looked like it was just covered with water because of that blue and the light shimmering off of each of those flowers. And we'd go in there and we'd have a family picnic, all these families, and we'd play in the creek. Most of the time, the creek wasn't very tall. Now, I realized I was in junior high, grade school, when we were doing this. That'd be like 7th grade or younger. But the creek, the water would always be moving. Problems are like that creek. They may not be deep. They may not be heavily rushing, but they are always moving against you. And as you were standing in the creek, you could look down and you could see the water moving around your legs. And if the water was deep enough, you could float or play in the water and it would carry you unless you put your foot down and stopped and decided to go against the current back up to where the picnic was. Problems are like that. They will come because you are in the creek of life. Yes, you may be having a picnic in that beautiful bluebell pasture, but you live in the creek of life. And that creek is going to always have water moving in it. Sometimes a big rushing current, sometimes just a little gentle current, but it's always moving. When I lived in Arizona, they would have washes that were dry probably 10, 11 months out of the year. But during monsoon season, and yes, they have monsoons, rain in the desert, especially when it would hit up in the mountains and the water would come rushing down, the wash that would have been dry and growing trees in it, and you could hike and bicycle and four-wheel drive through it, would become a raging torrent of water. And because the water was so seldom in those washes, we didn't have a lot of bridges over them. So you could drive through the wash when it was dry and just keep on going. But when those waters would come, they would block off the road so you couldn't drive through it. But I would drive down or walk down, because I didn't live very far from one of the rivers or washes there in that town, and I would watch that water just rush. But one of the interesting things I remember one time was I had driven up to a barrier. I was coming home from grocery shopping, and it had rained up in the mountains, but not that much down in the city. And I came to a wash, and I was only a few blocks from my house. And if they had blocked it off, which they did, they blocked off the wash, that meant I had to go around, which added a good 15, 20 minutes to my drive, where I was like less than 5 minutes from home. I now had to do 20 minutes more. However, when I was there, the road was dry. And I seriously considered, you know what, I can go around this barrier and get across because it's dry. And then I saw the water. It wasn't a major torrent yet. It was almost looked like a water that if you would put it, in your yard and turn on the hose, the water would come out and slowly be moving and moving down. And it was carrying some dirt with it and twigs and stuff, but it probably wasn't more than 3 or 4 or 5 inches deep, and it wasn't moving all that fast. And I sat there and I looked at that and I thought, that's still not much. I could still do it. But I decided I better not. You see, they had a law there called the idiot driver's law. Literally, that's what it's called. And if you drove around a barrier and went into a wash and you got stuck in the wash because of the water, then not only were you fined for going around the barrier, but you also had to pay the cost to be rescued by the fire department or whoever is going to help you out. If you're stupid enough to drive around the barrier, then you deserve to pay. So I went around and took the 20 minutes to go home. Coming up the other side, I was heading towards home, and I thought, you know what, I want to go see that one more time. Again, it's only been 20 minutes. But when I got to the wash, the water was bank to bank. Now realize this wash was easily 100 yards across. It was bank to bank. It would have ripped my car and just floating it down the stream. That little bit of tumbling that I saw earlier had long gone. It was now something that you would see in a whitewater rapids. It was moving water. It was moving trees. It was ripping up everything, easily 4 or 5 feet deep, if not more. All in the span of less than 20 minutes. Problems sometimes can feel that way. The first one may come and it may not feel like much, and we're tempted to go around it and ignore it and kind of keep on plowing ahead instead of facing what the problem could be. And sometimes the problems are small enough that, frankly, it's probably the wise thing to do. But you need to realize that in life, we have stupid driver's laws all through our life. That when the problem comes, and they will come, then we have options to deal with them, to solve them, then to keep going. You see, my extra 20-minute drive took me to a bridge over the top of the wash. It took me over the problem around to the other side where I wanted to be. I didn't ignore the problem because the water was there. But instead of getting bogged down in the problem, instead of getting bogged down in that little water coming down and that bigger water coming behind it, I decided to go over that problem and come in from the other side. That's what we're all called to do. We can and should expect problems. But then with the plan ahead, with the A, then we should always point to success. We should always point to success. That's our bridge over the waters. Like the old Simon and Garfunkel song, like a bridge over troubled waters. That's what success is when we run into problems. It's that bridge that takes us over the problems. And even though at times we have to deal with them, and then sometimes it feels like we have to be in the middle of that stream, swimming upstream against the hard current, and we're not getting anywhere, knowing that there's still a bridge there and that we've still had success, we can still keep going because it's already been occurring. And we trust and know if we stick with it, it will continue to occur in the future. That's what planning ahead is about. How do you know that you're being successful? How do you know, truly know, you're reaching your goals with those success steps along the way? That's why process becomes so important and not just the end result goal. And celebrate each little success. It may not be a big celebration. It may just be a quiet, yay. It could be a nice dinner. It could be ice cream. It could be 1 extra hour of TV, watching your favorite TV show. It could be anything to celebrate. High-fiving your family. High-fiving yourself. Yeah. It's good to have that goal of where you want to be. And I have goals in my life, and I have goals of my business, and I have personal goals that I want to be and to achieve and to do. I have all those. But it's the process along the way, those little successes along the way, that keep you going through those problems. Finally, on plan ahead, after you've allowed time for acceptance and you head into action, you start doing, and you expect the problems and you deal with those problems, and you always point to your successes and you celebrate your successes, then daily review your plan. Daily look at your life. Daily evaluate where you are and where you're going. If you look over your life day after day after day, you may only see this much of a growth. this much of a process, or progress, I should say. But if you multiply that by 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, then all of a sudden, over the course of a week, you could have made this much progress. And that looks a lot better than this, doesn't it? That's where celebrating the small successes come in. I remember when I made my first money in my own business. It wasn't a lot. But there's that sense of success. And we celebrated. I celebrated. I looked in the mirror and went, yes. It was all I could do to contain myself when I received that first check. You know, I look back on it now and kind of chuckle. But I'd also celebrated little successes along the way, reading books and learning about marketing and understanding concepts of being an entrepreneur and knowing and understanding what it meant to be on my own as a businessman. But that's okay. Each little success led to the next, to the next, to the next, and ultimately became bigger successes over the course of time. Where are you at? Where are you at right now? What are you pointing towards? What successes are you celebrating? How are you looking at your life day after day after day and evaluating where you're at and where you want to go and what's next? The law of navigation says you can either be the rudder of your life and of your business and the organization that you're a part of. You can be the rudder that directs where you're going, or you could be rudderless and just float along with the current. The difference lies in know the way, go the way, and show the way. Know the way, where do you want to go? Show the way. Show them how you can all get there together. So, because let's face it, success by yourself is not nearly as much satisfying as success with others. It's when others win with you. It literally multiplies the success feeling. And while maybe 5 of you have only won this much, together you have won that much. And you can celebrate that. But you have to go the way as well. You have to do it yourself. This week, I like giving homework assignments because I don't have to grade them. It's up to you. But this week, I like to challenge you with a homework assignment. I want you to plan ahead. I want you to P, predetermine your course of action. L, lay out your goal and goals. A, adjust your priorities as needed. Not changing your core values, but changing the other areas of your life to reach those goals and to be on that course of action, that process that gets you to where you want to be, and notify the people that are closest to you on what you want to do so that you can be held accountable. Then after you have planned, you then move ahead with the A, allow time for acceptance. The people around you may be shocked, maybe concerned, maybe scared, maybe jealous, maybe angry. Who knows all the emotions? But give them some time to accept what you want to do. But H, you still head into action. Because you don't want to start too big and fail. You want to take this, as the old saying goes, like you eat an elephant one bite at a time. If you looked at the elephant, you would think you could never eat it all. But if you take it one bite at a time, maybe even a bite a day, that elephant will soon disappear. Take small steps, but still take a step. And as you head into action, you will then have the E, expect the problems that will come your way, because they will come your way. Big problems, small problems, people problems, situation problems, financial problems, energy problems. Who knows? Because the list is endless of the type of problems, but expect them, deal with them, and then always point towards success and celebrate your successes, because they will be that bridge that will get you over and through those problems and not defeat you. And finally, D, daily review your plan. Where are you? Where have you been? What have you done? Who are you becoming? Who do you want to be? Don't go to bed until you've done your review. So that's how you can either be the rudder or to continue through life rudderless. We all have those choices. I hope and trust that you make the choice to become the rudder of your life and of your business and of your nonprofit, of whatever organization that you're a part of, and not go through life rudderless. Grab hold of life and live it. Don't become passive and let life live you. Don't float along anymore. Move along with purpose and energy, with action, with a plan going ahead. And as you do that, you will influence so many people that you will not believe who they are. You may never know who you're influencing. You may never understand what you've done for them. But that's what a leader does. Brings others along. So again, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate having you here. Feel free to email me, Richard Talbot, richard@richardtalbot.net. Check me out on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Replay these. I hope to have a channel up on YouTube very soon with all these replays as well. Above all, don't be rudderless. Be the rudder in your life and use that rudder as an influence for others that are around you. Have a great day. And I'll see you next Friday, 2 o'clock, as we go into the next step of what it means to be a leader and how they chart the course and move others along with them. Bye, and enjoy your coffee.